braving the cold and forecasting more snow.
No, you can't say that.
I'm thinking, I was kind of happy. The map they had on the news this morning, it's all going to stay east of us, I
Yes.
think.
Oh, good.
Might get 1 or 2 inches, but it's about the same.
Take your Bible this morning, let's turn to chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8. We'll get started here, verses 1 through 4. In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared unto me, even unto me Daniel, after that which appeared unto me at the first. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass, when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which is in the province of Elam, and I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Ulai. Then I lifted up mine eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram, which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him, neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand, but he did according to his will and became great. Well, last week we looked at the first vision that Daniel had. That was in the 1st year of Belshazzar. Now this is 2 years later, the 3rd year of Belshazzar's reign. And in the vision, Daniel sees himself in Shushan. That's a Persian capital city. And by the river, Persian river there, Ulai. And you've got to stop for just a moment here, because remember back in chapter 2 when Daniel was focusing with King Nebuchadnezzar and then interpreting the dream for Belshazzar, he shifted his language from Hebrew to Aramaic for the Chaldean. He now has shifted his language back to Hebrew, because this is mainly not for the Chaldeans, but it's for the Hebrew people. And so he's gone back to writing in Hebrew. Now what Daniel says he saw in this vision here was a great ram that had 2 horns. He describes one horn as being higher than the other. Now this is Daniel's referencing this to the Medo-Persian Empire. Persia was the much larger, greater of the 2 empires. The Medes were allies of Persia, but they were nearly of the size and power of the Persians. And that's the one big horn, one smaller horn. And here we are, long before the Medo-Persian Empire rises to power, and Daniel sees the figure of a ram. The ram became the emblem of Persian power. It was used on their flags, it was on their coins. So this is not just a coincidence here that Daniel is using the figure of the ram in describing the Medo-Persian Empire. Now he said he's seen this ram going to the west and going to the north and going to the south. And again, we know the 3 great conquests of Cyrus and the Medo-Persian Empire was to the west of them was Babylon. They conquered them. To the north was Lydia, or Asia Minor. We call it Turkey today. And to the south was Egypt. And that was the 3 great conquests of of the Medo-Persian Empire. Daniel said this ram was so great that there was none to oppose it. Now, Daniel's starting here with the ram and making a reference to the Medo-Persian Empire. What's missing from every vision, every dream, everything he's interpreted before up to this point? Babylon. No mention here of Babylon whatsoever. And it's so close to the end, I think it just doesn't matter. Babylon's at a point to where it's just a matter of time now. The Medo-Persian Empire is gathering at the gates already to defeat and destroy Babylon, so they're not even mentioned in this vision. Well, let's look verses 5 through 8, because the ram wasn't as mighty as he first appeared, or he may have been mighty, but another critter came along. And as I was considering, behold, a he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground, and the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had two horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran unto him in the fury of his power. And I saw him come close unto the ram, and he was moved with choler against him, and smote the ram, and brake his two horns, and there was no power in the ram to stand before him. But he cast him down to the ground, and stamped upon him, and there was none that could deliver the ram out of his hand. Therefore the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and for it came up four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. So Daniel says he's standing there beside this river, considering the greatness of this ram. And lo and behold, coming from the west, he sees a male goat. And this goat is moving so fast, he says his feet don't even touch the ground. I mean, it's kind of like a Roadrunner cartoon. When he was going, you didn't even have feet. He was just a cloud of dust, and he was gone. But that's what Daniel's seeing with this goat. Now, he was an odd goat. He only had one horn. I guess you would say he was a unicorn goat. But what Daniel is referencing here with this goat is the Grecian Empire and Alexander the Great. He says the goat attacked the ram, and he describes here with almost a viciousness. He moved with rage, and he attacked this ram and ran into him and broke both of the ram's horns off. And Daniel says that the ram was powerless to stand against this goat. The goat didn't knock this ram to the ground and trampled on him. And Daniel even went so far as to say there's no other power on earth that could stand and save the ram from the goat. And you remember we've talked about this before, how quickly Alexander the Great moved across Europe and Asia, conquered the whole place. In just 10, 11 years, he moved across that whole continent, that whole area, and conquered it. And that's what Daniel's saying here. He said that goat became very great. And just as he reached the peak of his greatness, he says, that horn was broken. You know, Alexander died at a very young age, 31, 32 years old. not having an heir to lead his empire to. After the one horn the goat had was broken, Daniel sees 4 horns come up in its place. And we know history tells us that after Alexander died, the territories that he had conquered were divided among 4 of his generals. One of them, named Cassander, took over Greece and its regions. And I'm going to butcher some of these pronunciations. Another one named Lysimachus took rule over Asia Minor. Seleucus reigned over Syria and Israel. And Ptolemy took over Egypt. And so that's exactly what Daniel's seen here, that one great horn breaking, just as it became great, and 4 horns coming up in its place. Let's look through verses 9 through 12. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceeding great toward the south and toward the east and toward the pleasant land. That's Daniel's way of describing the Holy Land, his home, Judah and Jerusalem. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and of the stars to the ground, and stamped upon them. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of the host, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of his sanctuary was cast down, and an host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground, and it practiced and prospered. Buckle up your seatbelts right now, because we're heading down another dual prophecy, a 2-lane highway. One lane goes from here at breakneck speed to the very birth of Christ. The other lane goes all the way to the second coming of Christ.
Yes.
So buckle up, because we're in for a ride. Out of one of them horns, the 4 horns that came up upon the goat, came up a little horn. Now, this is a different little horn than was in Daniel's vision last week, because he made direct reference there to the Antichrist. And we've seen how Daniel described it, and it went right along with what John had seen in his vision in Revelation. The little horn here is dual. Another one of those dual prophecies. It has a near fulfillment and a far fulfillment. The little horn here came out of the Seleucid dynasty. And that's the one that ruled over Syria and Israel. And his name was Antiochus Epiphanes IV. Antiochus Epiphanes was a bad man. He killed his brother in order to gain the throne. Now all of this is taking place between the Old Testament and New Testament. You can read about it in the Apocrypha. We do not consider that to be inspired scripture. It's not in our Bible. Catholics and some others do include it in their Bible, but it's good history. There's a great detail of what took place between the Old Testament and the New Testament in it, and you can find Antiochus and his actions in there. So all this is taking place between about 200 to 150 BC. Remember, from the Old Testament and New Testament was 400 years, so this is in between in that. Antiochus hated the Jews. He did everything he could do. We read some of it here, and Dan will get into more detail about it later. He did everything he could do away with their religion, to do away with their God, and to do away with their traditions, and impose Greek culture upon them. It's estimated that he killed somewhere in the neighborhood of 100,000 Jews. If you were just walking down the street and he seen you and didn't like the way you looked, you're fixing to die. He took joy in the mother carrying her baby, taking that baby away from her and killing it in front of her just to see the horror, the grief on that mother's face. He was so evil that it was pretty well understood, believed, that he had to be possessed. And this is not the way he acted and behaved, just wasn't, even for a mean, cruel human being, he went beyond all that. And as Daniel here is talking about casting down the host and the stars and the stamping, he's talking about anybody who was a leader in Israel, he killed, he took them out. He made absolutely sure that there was nobody to raise up any resistance or effort to keep him out of power. Now, when Daniel talks about here about him taking away the sacrifices, the sanctuary being cast down, you're going to see real quick here where the dual prophecy comes in. I was amazed just at how close the name was. Antiochus Antichrist.
Yes.
And the Epiphanes was a name he gave himself, not given to him by his mother. He gave himself, which it basically meant glorious, wonderful. So as he went around and introduced himself to people, basically he was saying, I'm Antiochus the God. Because that's exactly how he wanted the Jews in Israel to regard him, as being a God. So what Antiochus did to take away the sacrifices and cast down the sanctuary, coming back from Alexandria, having been defeated in the battle, he takes his frustration and his anger out upon the Jews. He takes a pig into the altar, sacrifices that pig, takes the blood of the pig, sprinkles it around through the temple, and then forces the Jews to eat the pig.
Right.
And so having defiled the temple right away, the Jews, one, he forbid it, but two, being unclean and defiled, they couldn't continue to make the daily sacrifices and stuff in there. And he even went in and set up a statue of Zeus in the temple. Now, Israel was in such poor shape, and you remember as we went through Ezekiel, how he described the sin and how bad everything was going in Israel. The sin and everything in Israel was so bad here. The transgression Daniel's talking about here, I don't believe is the transgression of Antiochus.
No.
It's a transgression of the Jews that God allowed somebody like Antiochus to come on the scene and basically wreak terror on them for 6 years. Now, during the time of Antiochus there, they had a succession, one after another, of high priests. Because he put it out to bid. You be the highest bidder, you pay me the most money, bribe me with the largest amount, and I'll make you high priest. And so we actually had high priests killing one another, bribing Antiochus to have taken and to have that position. So you can see how everything was going in Jerusalem and in the temple with this guy. And God allowed a devil like Antiochus to have his time, and he slaughtered Israel. But it was through his persecution that, as you read in the Apocrypha there, he finally made enough Israelites mad enough that they got together. 6 years they overthrew him. Judas Maccabees overthrew him, and they cleansed the temple, restored it back to using it, doing the sacrifices and the service and stuff. And we know this was true because when we get to the New Testament and Jesus comes on the scene, he's presented at the temple, he's observing the services and the sacrifices and the feasts and stuff that are going. So when they defeated this guy, didn't kill him. It says here later, he's defeated and done, but not by human hands. They didn't kill him. They run him out and then cleansed the temple and restored it back to service and using it and doing what God had them supposed to be doing there. Let's look now, because this gets real interesting.
Yes.
Through the rest of the chapter now. Look at verses 13 through 14. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. What Daniel's telling us here is that he heard an angel in his vision speaking, and then one angel was speaking to another angel. Some people believe one of those was an Old Testament picture of Jesus. I don't think he would refer to him as the same as he wouldn't be referred to on the same level. And we're going to find out later who one of these angels are. But Daniel said, I heard one angel speaking to another angel. He asked a certain angel, How long will the desecration of the temple be? And they have to go without the daily sacrifices. How long will these sacrifices be suspended and the temple be desecrated? The angel answers, 2,300 days. You wouldn't want to guess what took place over the course of 2,300 days, from the time Antiochus began his persecution of the Jews until they cleansed and restored the temple. 2,300 days. A little over 6 years. And I say, if you never read the history that's in the Apocrypha, it's really interesting that Maccabean revolts and everything that was going on. But this all took place from about 171 BC, and the temple cleansing took place December 25th, 165 BC. And so that's what Daniel is saying here. You heard the angels say that it's going to be 2,300 days, and that sacrifices will be done again, the temple will be cleansed, and it will be used again. I've got a warning here, though. With this prophetic stuff, like 2,300 days being mentioned here, and there's other things in the Bible where people have tried to do. Don't manipulate biblical numbers to try to figure out what Jesus himself said no man can know.
That's right.
Amen.
Exactly.
That's right.
A guy named Miller took the Bible verse of a day is as a year and figured out from the cleansing of the temple is going to be 2,300 years. When Jesus came back, and he figured out it's going to be 1884. Guess what did not happen? The problem being, he had a huge following in America at the time.
Right.
I mean, Joel Osteen, Rick Warren, Kenneth Cope, put them all together, and they don't have the following that he had. And it became known as the Great Disappointment. Rocked the Christian faith in America to its knees. And out of that, because they all say the same thing now, well, man messed it up. Man's got it all messed up, they do. And God's given me the right. Out of that great disappointment came the Seventh-day Adventists, the Jehovah's Witness, and the Mormons. Because man had it all wrong, messed it all up, and God somehow came and give them the straight scoop on it. And then somebody else did it back in the 80s. I mean, it was not nearly as large as this one, but stop. Anybody tries to manipulate biblical numbers so they can figure out or claim to know what the Bible says no man can know, they're a fool from the get-go, and you should know that.
Yes.
Let's look now verses 15 through 19. And it came to pass, when even I, Daniel, had seen the vision and sought for the meaning, then behold, there stood before me as the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, which called and said, Gabriel, make this man to understand the vision. So he came near where I stood, and when he came, I was afraid and fell upon my face. But he said unto me, Understand, O Son of Man, for at the time of the end shall be the vision. Now as he was speaking with me, I was in a deep sleep on my face toward the ground, but he touched me and set me upright. And he said, Behold, I will make thee know what shall be in the last end of the indignation, for at the time appointed the end shall be. Okay, so we've shifted from the one lane of the highway that ran right up to the birth of Jesus. Now we're on the other lane that's going all the way to the second coming.
Right.
Daniel hears these two angels talking again. The one of them this time is identified as Gabriel, God's messenger. The other angel tells Gabriel, Gabriel, you got to make him understand what all of this means. And so Gabriel comes near. Daniel says, man, I was afraid. Now, I've got a real strong suspicion that angels don't look like chubby little babies floating around with a little bow and arrow.
Amen. Amen. That's right.
There's a different appearance there because every time man has an encounter with one and he knows it's an angel, there's one thing that happens every time. They find themselves on their face on the ground.
Right.
And that's exactly what Daniel says here. I was afraid and I fell down on my face. And here in verse 2, he's talking about being in a deep sleep. I think that's called passing out. I was so scared I fell down and I passed out. But Gabriel says to him, you got to understand this. This vision is about the time of the end.
Right.
So see, now we're not talking about something that happened in the near future of Daniel. This is in the far off end time prophecy now. And I guess Gabriel didn't like, and in other places the angels encountering man is saying, don't bow down and
Right.
worship me. No, I'm not who you think I am. When Gabriel touches Daniel, makes him stand up straight, says, listen, this vision you're having, this is stuff that's dealing with the end times, the very, and I'll notice he didn't say the end of time, but the time of the end.
Right.
And I think it's different there to make that, because when this thought takes place, there's still another 1,000 years that Christ is going to rule on this earth. Look in verses 20 through 26 now. Gabriel kind of explains to Daniel what all he's seen, and I don't want to go through that again, but we're going to look at some of the comparisons of what's in the scriptures here as we look at Antiochus and the Antichrist. Verses 20 through 26. The ram which thou sawest having two horns are the kings of Media and Persia. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia. And the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king. Now that being broken, whereas four stood up for it, 4 kingdoms shall stand up out of the nation, but not in his power. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding, dark sentences shall stand up. That referring to Antiochus. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power. And he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and practice, and shall destroy the mighty and the holy people. And through his policy also he shall cause craft to prosper in his hand, and he shall magnify himself in his heart, and by peace shall destroy many. He shall also stand up against the prince of princes, but he shall be broken without hand. And the vision of the evening and the morning which was told is true. Wherefore shut thou up the vision, for it shall be for many days. Well, one thing we need to pay attention to here is Gabriel telling Daniel that he's going to have power,
It's awesome.
but not by his power.
Right.
Now, whether we're talking about Antiochus or the Antichrist, that would apply to both of them
Yes.
as being possessed. And remember, the Antichrist, to do the things he's doing, he's no mere man.
Right.
And he's human, he's a man, but he's 100% totally, completely possessed by the devil. We see here, it says he shall destroy God's people. Well, Antiochus, 100,000 Jews he was credited with killing. The Antichrist, we have no idea, but the tribulation saints will be martyred just as fast as he can run through them. I don't know if any of you read the Left Behind series. There's a lot of artistic liberty taken there where they
Yes,
filled
it
in
is.
blanks that we don't know. But it did kind of follow the biblical, they had guillotine stations set up all over the earth. And as soon as they identified you as not having the mark, you were in one of those lines being martyred. And the only people that don't have the mark are those that refused it. And that's, we kind of wonder, well, how are folks going to be saved during the tribulation? It's got to be through a faith in Jesus Christ. But I find one little phrase there in Revelation, they neither bowed down and worshiped the beast nor took his mark.
That's right.
So that's part of what's got to be done in the tribulation saints to be saved.
That's right.
There's a reference here to destroying when, and by peace shall destroy many. What did Apostle Paul said when they declare peace and safety, look out?
Yes.
The Antichrist is going to appear to be a great peacemaker, a unifier. He's going to bring all these warring nations and factions around the earth together, because he's going to rule over them with absolute power for one thing, but he'll be presented as and look as a great peacemaker and a unifier. It hit me this week. We talked last week about the 10 horns, and then it got down to 7. There's 7 continents, and I believe the Antichrist is going to have 7 kings or 7 rulers over each one of those continents. And I've been struggling with this. There's hundreds of nations around this earth. We're watching it happen right here in our nation right now. There's no such a thing as a southern border
Right.
anymore. South America, Central America, North America, they're all just going to become America. I believe that because there's no effort, there's no desire. I don't care which political party you look at. If either one of them was serious about it, somebody would do something. But there's no effort whatsoever being made to establish a border. So we're going to see things begin to change as far as our maps and stuff goes. Gabriel tells Daniel, going to exalt himself. We know Antiochus did. He came in and made the Jews regard him, treat him as if he was the God. The Antichrist will go into the next temple once it's built and he's on the scene, and at the time he's going to go into the Holy of Holies and declare himself to be God. Even taking a mortal wound and coming back to life 3 days later. I mean, he's going to do everything to look like
Yes.
he's the Son of God. Another comparison here is, says he's going to be defeated, but not by man.
Right.
Maccabees didn't kill Antiochus. History says he died of some kind of disease. He died natural causes. They just run him out of Israel. The Antichrist is going to put up a battle. Jesus is going to put an end.
Yes.
Now we got just a few minutes here to look at verse 27, because this whole thing, this one verse, verse 27, is one that just jumped out all over me. And I, Daniel, fainted and was sick certain days. Afterward I rose up and did the king's business, and I was astonished at the vision, but none understood. Daniel said this whole vision thing, I mean, the last vision upset him. This whole vision upset him so much that he was sick for some days.
Yes.
We got to remember, Daniel had no knowledge of the church, no knowledge of anything like the rapture or the second coming of Christ. So the visions of the time of the end, he's seen it, he recorded it, he pondered upon it, but it upset him. It really made him sick. And I've always kind of shied away from the end time stuff because so many people go to seed on it. I mean, they get so caught up that that's all they want to talk about and do and study. I mean, they just get carried away with it. Here's the key for us.
Yes.
Daniel says, I got up after a couple of days. I got busy taking care of the king's business.
That's good.
You know, it's knowing about the end time. It's good.
Right.
Not to get obsessively consumed by it, but it's fascinating. We need to understand it's a gift of God that He's revealed this to us. Even though we're not going to be here, He still has given us what we need to know about it and revealed everything to it. But don't let the end time stuff take you away from what you're supposed to be doing.
Amen, brother. That's right.
We are still to be about the King's business. What He's called us to do. Thanks for being here this morning.
Amen.
I wanted to make sure you said.